Hello, welcome to our latest Writers Who Run. Today I'm here with Wendy Wagner, author of Girl in the Creek, among other novels and short stories. Wendy's writing ranges from horror to sci-fi to nature writing, but Girl in the Creek, her most recent, is a horror story covering mysterious missing persons cases in a small Oregon town, and it was published in July of last year. Thanks for joining, Wendy.
Thanks for having me. I'm so delighted.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've never interviewed a horror writer before. So this is my first, and I'm very excited to talk to you.
Great. Well, I have found that the horror writers I know are some of the most cheerful and easygoing people you will ever meet. When people go to a horror writers convention or something, they come away saying everybody there is so nice. It's so strange.
Yes, I can already tell that from our 2 minutes of interaction.
I guess these horror writers just get it all out on the page and then they can go through their day just being happy.
That's so funny. Yeah, I had a mentor in college who was a horror writer, but I took his classes for historical fiction, which is what I like to focus on in my fiction writing. And he was just like the most delightful man ever, just jolly, kind of like a
Oh,
Santa Claus character.
that's great.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll just jump into my questions here. So, my first question, you're a hiker, a trail runner, and these two activities are pretty present in Girl in the Creek. And I'm just wondering, how did your experience in nature influence the development of this book?
Sure. Well, first of all, as a quick side note, one of the biggest notes that I got from my editor as we were working on this book was maybe there could be a tiny bit less hiking. Maybe we could cut that hiking scene, so it was kind of hilarious.
Did you
But
end up listening to her advice? Like, how much was taken out?
there were a couple of scenes that just were a lot of let's get someplace and have a scale. It was
Oh,
slightly spooky in the woods, but we trimmed that down to focus a little bit more on character and plot development.
gotcha.
Um, but that's okay. You only need to fall down so many ravines or slip on a trail or have to go scrambling over rocks so much in one book.
Right, right. I mean, I enjoyed those sort of scene-setting moments where you're like, I was in it, right? I'm in the woods and I'm like, something's gonna happen. Like this is, yeah.
Yay! That was definitely the goal, for the book, was to really capture that moment when you're out in the woods and for some reason you get that off feeling and you have to make that decision, do I keep going? Do I turn around? What's my safest choice? I think if you are a hiker, you've probably been in that kind of
Mhm.
situation, or I know tons of people who are trail runners who've had what just weird experiences where they had to make that kind of judgment call. So that was sort of in the background of being just this huge inspiration for the book,
Mhm.
was those weird feelings you get in the woods. And well, I most of the time just feel fantastic out there. And I think it's dreamy, and I would spend every day out there if I could. It was fun to play up the scary aspects.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like when you sit around a campfire and you start exchanging scary stories and you're just one-upping each other. That was what was happening in my brain.
Have you ever personally had those moments where, or have you ever been on a trail and thought, oh, this is like the scene of a something scary, you know?
I've had one or two moments where a tree fell nearby that was a really close call. Last year, I was out on Portland's Wildwood Trail and I got in a standoff with a coyote that was really quite scary because, in general, coyotes they don't want to have anything to do with you and they'll just keep going their own way. But this coyote, I imagine, must have had a den nearby or something and was concerned. Later I learned that several people that week had standoffs with coyotes on
Interesting.
that trail. So those were scary things. Luckily, I haven't, I do have a few friends that I know who, have had bad encounters with unpleasant men or scary dogs on the trail. I'd say the only place that's really, really captured my imagination as what the heck happened here, and there's got to be a story, is here in Portland in Forest Park. There's This really, like everybody goes, it's called Leif Erikson Drive. It was originally supposed to be like a real road in the forest, but it was decommissioned and now it's just for cycling and biking. And in the winter, there's one place where you can see at one point some cars were maybe dumped off the side of the road, like in the 60s. They're really old. And so, like in the summertime, they're so covered up by the trees, you can't see them. But there is something so uncanny about seeing them like sliding down a cliff when you're out running in the fog. It's very magical and kind of spooky, and you just really want to tell like a terrible story.
That's so interesting. Do you ever get inspiration for horror stories like in these moments?
I mean, I would say that most of my fiction is really inspired by Oregon history and real things that have
Ooh, okay.
happened here in the state. So definitely, whenever I'm out and about, I'm always really interested in looking into the history of places and just sort of investigating the tensions that come from the way we interact with wilderness, the way we interact with each other, and how that unfolds, particularly in places where there just aren't a lot of people. I think a lot of mysterious things can happen out where no one is looking.
Yeah.
And, I grew up here in Oregon in the 80s and 90s, which was a really peak time for serial killer activity in the state of Oregon and Washington. So I think it was definitely something that was like people were really worried about
Mhm.
when I was a kid. Even when I was like, 4 or 5, I did not understand the case, but my favorite newscaster, we lived in Eastern Washington at the time, and my favorite newscaster was a woman named Shelley Monahan, and she was attacked by this like really scary serial rapist in Spokane.
Oh,
And so I did not understand what had happened to Shelley because obviously people weren't trying to share that information with me as a preschooler. But it was something like I knew that there was something terrible that had happened to her and it was part of something big. And I think it just really planted a lot of seeds in my head that there were undercurrents in the world where people weren't always very safe, even if they were like famous and important.
wow. Yeah, that's a very interesting formative memory that's like still serving you in your work. That's wild.
Yeah.
Can you tell me just a bit about your creative process?
Sure. Uh, when I started out as a writer, I was much more organized and very like, I'm going to write an outline and I'm going to know what's going to happen in my book before I start writing it. And that was very helpful because when I first started writing, I was writing tie-in fiction. So I had to work with other people very intensely and like really, get all of my outlines approved and things like that. And I think maybe I burnt out that part of my brain. So now I'm like, oh, I'm gonna write a great book, and it's gonna be about this one image I had when I was out on a hike, or this one dream I had. And I just know that one still picture and a weird word and I'm like, yes, that's my book, yes. And but then I have to do a lot of experimental writing and research and poking around until I actually like find some characters that go with that story and figure out a plot and things like that. So it's not very efficient process, but I have a good time, I think.
I didn't even write this question down, but now that we're talking, I'm just curious, like how long does it take you to write a book when you're using that sort of like nebulous process?
Sometimes it can take a long time, sometimes it can go really quickly. The book I have out on submission right now, I had an idea for it. I wrote it just straight through in about 4 months.
Wow.
Girl in the Creek, however, took like maybe 2.5 years because it's like I started writing it and I changed my mind about some things and I threw that out and I revised that and I changed that. And so there were a lot of false starts before I actually got it in a direction that I liked.
Yeah.
It didn't help that an extremely popular and fantastic book called Mexican Gothic came out when I was early in the writing of my book, which is a book that happens to be about creepy fungi, not in the woods, but I felt like, oh, I really need to change my approach to creepy fungi.
That actually leads me to a different question I was going to ask later on, but running and writing, both pursuits that can kind of leave someone doubting themselves. There's a lot of room for that there. And I'm sure you come across another book that's similar to an idea you're doing, and you probably have this doubt that floods in. And just from your experience, like how do you cope with that? Do you have advice for dealing with those scaries in running or writing?
Well, I think, first of all, it's totally okay to let yourself be like depressed and disappointed for a little while when you have those kinds of feelings. Lots of people go through it. I have a really good friend, Keith Rawson. He's a really successful writer, and he was fired up about like a new book, and he's like 30,000 words in, and then he reads an announcement in Publishers Weekly that a new book is coming out that's almost the same exact premise. When that happens, you're crushed. So, it's totally okay to like be upset when those things happen, and it's good to give yourself time to kind of get over those bad feelings. Because I think there's nothing worse than like feeling bad and then being upset with yourself for being bad. So then you start beating yourself up like, I should be productive and I should be doing great, but you still feel bad. And so then you just get in like a downward spiral of misery. So it's okay, just take a little time off, recoup, and when that happens, like in running, it's a great time to maybe do some cross training, right? Like, now is a good time to go on a backpacking trip if you've just like got your buns handed to you at like a tough race and you feel like the world's slowest person, and it's okay to like do something else for a little while. Same with writing, right? It's like set aside that project, research something else that's fun. Maybe write a short story or do some poetry, something, keeping the muscles working, but using them in new, different ways. And that's usually when you have those moments when you're trying something new and different. I think it can give you like a new joy in the experience. I find a lot of times, like when I get done with a writing project, a lot of times I'll spend a couple of weeks working on poetry. And because it's such a different format, it just makes me so excited about writing again. And I find when I go back to writing novels, then I just feel so like, oh, I have all these new skills. My sentences are so much better. And then once you start feeling better, then ideas like really start catching on fire. And it's an upward spiral, right? So try to find your way to upward spirals, I think is a good thing to do.
That's a great way to phrase it. Go to the upward spiral. Opposite
Yes,
opposite of doom scrolling, right? Like
very much.
yeah.
Yes. That's one advice, no matter what, whether you're talking running or riding, is don't fall for the doom scrolling. Like get off your phone, do something else. You'll feel 100% better.
Yeah, I saw on your website you're also a writing coach.
Yeah.
Can you talk about just sort of how you came into that, and like has your approach to coaching been influenced at all by your athletic experience?
So kind of the way I got into writing coaching, which I don't do a ton of, but I really enjoy it a lot when I do. It's really fun. It kind of started because I was working with a lot of local organizations, like teaching like group writing classes and things like that. And after classes and workshops, people would reach out to me and say like, oh, I loved working together on a short story or whatever, but I feel like I need more help to keep going. And I kind of came up with every kind of writing coach structures their practice very differently. And I tend to approach it as being less about, well, you give me your work and I tell you whether it's good or bad, and more about talking about our strengths and your strengths and weaknesses as a writer, talking about ways to structure your time or how to start a new project. And I try to make it something where we can focus on small steps we can take toward really making writing a successful part of our lives.
Hmm.
And I think I have been super influenced by two coaches that in the world of running. And one is Dana Katz, who runs Ultra U running coaching. And
Okay.
she has a fantastic newsletter. And she's just a great person. She's a Pacific Northwest local. And I got to know her because she was doing like these online strength training for runners classes during the pandemic. And she just always had such practical, easy to implement advice every time you would talk to her. And was just like this amazing ray of positive energy. And yes, so I just felt like what she did for me as a runner would be something would be great to do for writers, like that same kind of thing. Like just do this one thing and you'll start kickstarting off upward spirals. And then of course the other big influence is every week I gotta listen to the Swap podcast. Like there's just I can't resist the Roaches and their training techniques. They're just so funny and delightful and just so full of positive energy.
Oh, I've never listened to their podcast. I've read,
The Happy Runner.
yes, I've read their column, and like they used to do a column in Trail Runner mag. I don't
Hmm.
know if they still do, but I've read their stuff. I haven't listened to the podcast though.
Oh, it's hilarious. They're
Okay,
really
good to
great.
know.
Yeah.
They have great coaching philosophies, I feel. And I do see more of that like positive outlook in running coaches lately, like more of the, this is a lifestyle versus like here's how to hit your, your mileage and
Yeah, for me, like any advice that starts from like the David Goggins type method of like go hard, be hard, all the time hard. Like that's just never gonna work for me. I am not
uh,
that kind of a runner. I'm not that kind of a writer either. Like I know so many people that are like, I chain myself to my desk until I get my 1,000 words in. And I'm like, yeah, I probably would have chewed off my own limb if I did something like that. So I'm all about trying to find ways to like just make it work.
yeah, that's something I've found really interesting about writing this column and interviewing different writers and runners is everyone's got a different approach.
Yeah.
And their approach to running typically reflects their approach to writing too, which I just find, whether they are more of the like, I'm going to go out every day and run do my streak and I'm going to sit at my desk every day, or like, I'm just going to go with the flow and, kind of see how it goes and pop out for a run when I need it. And it's interesting how they parallel each other.
Yeah. I just in general find that writing and running are great parallels.
Mm.
And the things that I learn in running like help me so much as a writer. And the reverse, right? Like they're both activities that require so much like inner grit and the ability to stick with something and see it through. And yeah, so I feel like they're perfect companions.
Yeah. So speaking of that, you write novels. You also write short stories, and I saw essays and poems. And I'm thinking about the length of a writing project in conjunction with the length of a race, or I don't know if you race or if you just run, for your heart or whatever. But do you find that those correlate? Are you somebody who, prefers the distance projects, or you want to do the short sprints every once in a while? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hilarious that you would ask that because when people ask all the time, like, do you prefer writing short stories or do you prefer writing novels? And I'm always say, well, I really like writing novels because for a big part of it is I just really love writing so much. And if I don't get to write in a day, then my day feels hollowed out. And after too many of those days have gone by, then I'm really depressed.
Mhm.
So I really like just coming up with one world that I can just dive into and just stay in for a long time. And I really, really like that a lot. And I haven't like pushed register yet, but I am hoping to do an ultra this summer. So I think it kind of is, they go together really well.
Yeah, I never want to assume, but it does seem like people who trail run, I don't trail run, I run on the roads, but it does seem like trail running just goes hand in hand with ultra distances. But
Yeah,
I never want to assume like maybe you're going out and doing short trail runs. That if I were me, I would do short trail runs.
they're really great. I mean, most of the trail runs I've done have been, like in the 10K zone, and most of the races I've done out there have been a 10K to half marathon. It's fun to think about trying something longer.
Yeah, it's just hard to wrap your head around that kind of distance, you know?
To me, there's no better concept of a day than to just be outside moving around and eating snacks all day. Like that's the appeal, like eating snacks all day. Like what's not to love?
Sure. Hopefully you have a good support system to help you out there.
Oh, yes.
Good. So like I mentioned, I've never interviewed a horror writer and I don't write the genre myself. Can you talk about like what is the special sauce for getting like that fear to come to life?
It's a little tricky. I think like for me, a lot of the special sauce kind of comes through in revision because for me, the more exciting a scene is, the more it appears in my head as like a little movie. And so when I'm writing it out, it kind of will sometimes read like a movie script where it's like, she ran to the left, the monster attacked her from behind, and so it's like you'll have like long passages in this book which are like people in the woods and it's eloquent and immersive and then you get to something exciting and then it reads like really terribly flat. And so it's like, oh, I guess I was having so much fun. I forgot to make it fun for readers. So going through and revising and trying to re-immerse myself into that moment, but like not getting so caught up in it, I forgot I can like stay focused on the reader experience and learning to kind of slow down in those moments and really, really dig into. I think nothing is more important in writing horror than like that sensory information that the point of view character is absorbing about the space because and the sensory experience that they are having inside themselves because so much of being frightened is this physiological experience, right? So trying to capture the feelings and sounds outside but also inside, like those weird feelings you get when you're scared,
Yeah.
and just trying to capture that on the page so the reader can experience both the onslaught in, and the internal turmoil. So
Yeah,
I think,
that makes sense.
yeah, I think that's sort of the heart and soul of like writing scary scenes.
Yeah, that makes sense. It would really affect the pacing.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get into those moments. And it is funny that you said that about it plays out like a movie in your head because I'm picturing a specific scene in the bakery. I don't want to like give any spoilers away, but I remember that scene sort of in the middle of the book to me read very cinematic in a good way, not in like a oh this is a script, but I remember reading it and feeling like oh this feels like I'm watching a movie, which was really cool.
Oh, awesome. Yay. I love that scene.
It's a good scene. What are you working on now as far as I know what you have planned for running, but what are you working on with your writing?
I've been researching for kind of a while on a novel, and I'm just like starting to actually write it. And it's sort of a psychological thriller set on the Oregon coast. So I'm pretty excited. I've written two other books that were set on the Oregon coast. That's where I grew up. So I'm delighted to be writing in that setting again. But this is in like on the North Coast, which is my favorite place to go visit. And yeah, I'm really excited to have more excuses to go out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The Oregon coast is beautiful.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. And also a little creepy.
Extremely creepy. Yeah, this book will be set at a state park that was like a military fort with like all these creepy old concrete bunkers and batteries that you can go visit, and it's extremely, extremely creepy. And that's where this book will be set.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
And that's not the book that's on submission. That's a different book.
No. That one is also, it's about a man who goes hiking in the North Cascades National Park and is attacked by a bear and then starts to have like mysterious visions and things.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's keep our fingers crossed that it finds a good home.
Yes, I would love to read that. Next, we're going to move on to our speed round. In one word, what would you say Girl in the Creek is about?
Disappearance.
Where is your favorite place to run in Portland?
Forest Park.
Where is your favorite place to run anywhere in the world?
I haven't gone running outside of the United States. I guess it would be the Mount Hood National Forest.
Ooh, scary. If you could go for a run with any of your characters, who would you run with?
Probably Hari, even though he's not a very good runner, which would be good because our paces would be better matched. But he's just so fun and kind and supportive and fun. And just I think we'd have a great time.
I love that answer. And what are you reading right now?
I am reading a book called 2666 by Roberto Bolaño. It is like a 900 word tome it's kind of literary mystery, a little bit weird fiction about a wide variety of people who are brought in connection to some cases of missing and murdered women in a city in Mexico that is inspired by real events in the 90s. Like, I don't know how it's going to end or what's going to happen. It's very interesting and very different and a really good read though.
Wow, I'll have to add that to my list. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, he's a fantastic writer.
Okay, those were all my questions. Thank you so much for jumping on today. This was a really fun interview.
Yay, I'm so glad to hear it.